Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. This lecture is about S3, security and encryption. So let's start with security and how you can secure your buckets. So by default, all newly created buckets are private, and you saw that in one of the last labs when we created a bucket and we uploaded a file to the bucket and then we couldn't access the file. We kept getting that error message, that XML error message that said access denied. So we had to go in there, we had to make that bucket public, or we had to actually make that file public. Now there's a couple of things that you can do in order to set up access controls to your buckets. The first one's using bucket policies. Now bucket policies are bucket wide, so the permissions are applied to the entire bucket. And then you can also use access control lists. Now your access control list can actually drill down to individual objects. And again, you saw that in the lab. We made a particular object public, but the rest of the bucket was private. So going into the exam, it's really important to understand that you can secure your buckets using those two features, so bucket policies and access control lists. The other thing to remember is that S3 buckets can be configured to create access logs, which log all requests made to the S3 bucket. And this can be done to another bucket, and it can even be done to another AWS account. And we'll talk a bit about how to set up cross-account access later on in this course. So let's move on to encryption. Now encryption is a very important thing to note going into the exam. You will be expected to know the 4 different methods of encryption for S3. Now there's 2 types of encryption. There's in transit and then there's data at rest. So in transit is simply when you're sending information to and from your bucket, so from your PC to the bucket itself. And then that's secured using SSL or TLS encryption. For those that you don't know, TLS is basically the replacement to SSL, but those terms seem to be a bit interchangeable at the moment. So it's just using HTTPS. That's how you encrypt your data in transit. And then at rest, there's 4 different methods for encryption at rest. So there's server-side encryption, and then there's client-side encryption. So we'll start with server-side encryption. So there's 3 different methods under the server-side encryption. There's S3 managed keys. And this is basically where each object is encrypted with a unique key employing strong multi-factor encryption. And then as an additional safeguard, Amazon actually encrypt the key itself with a master key, and they regularly rotate that master key. Now Amazon handle all the keys for you. It's AES 256, so that's Advanced Encryption Standard 256-bit to encrypt your data, and basically you don't have to worry about it. The way you use that service is how we saw in the lab, where you just click on the object and you hit encrypt. So that's the most common one, and it's known as server-side encryption S3. So the next one is server-side encryption with AWS KMS managed keys, and basically KMS is Key Management Service. And this is very similar to SSE S3, but it comes with a few additional benefits as well as some additional charges for using it. So there's separate permissions for the use of an envelope key. Now an envelope key is simply a key that protects your data's encryption key, and that provides basically added protection against unauthorized access to your objects in S3. The other main advantage of SSE KMS is that it also provides you with an audit trail of when your keys were used and who was actually using the keys. It gives you that additional level of transparency as to who is decrypting what and when. And then you also have the option to create and manage encryption keys yourself, or you can use a default key that's unique to you, the service that you're using, as well as the region that you're working in. And then finally, the other methodology is using server-side encryption with customer-provided keys. This is sometimes referred to as SSC-C. And this is where you manage the encryption keys, and Amazon manages the encryption as it writes to disk, and then the decryption as to when you access your objects. But the actual management of the key is done by you yourself. So those are the 3 server-side encryptions, and you really just need to remember server-side encryption S3, server-side encryption KMS, server-side encryption C, and then finally you have client-side encryption, and this is effectively where you encrypt the data on your client side and then you upload it to S3. So that's it, Cloud Gurus. It's really pretty simple. Just remember going into the exam that you can secure your buckets using bucket policies and access control lists. You can turn logging on to see what people are doing in your buckets, and you can either log to that bucket itself, to another bucket, or even to another AWS account entirely. You can secure data traveling to and from S3 using SSL, and then in terms of when the data is stored in S3, you can encrypt that data using SSE S3, SSE KMS, SSE-C, and then also using client-side encryption. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.